Dead men tell no tales. That is the oldest saying in criminal history. It means that once a heart stops beating, the secrets die with it. In forensics, we rely on Locard's exchange principle. It says that every criminal leaves a trace, a fingerprint, a strand of hair, a drop of blood. But what happens when the only witness to the crime is the victim? And what if that victim decides to break the silence from the other side? Today, we are opening 4 classified files that defy logic. 4 cases where the breakthrough didn't come from a microscope or a DNA test. It came from a voice that shouldn't exist. We will travel from the dark alleys of 1970s Chicago to the foggy streets of London. We will see how a vision led police to a body when helicopters failed. And we will see how a ghost diagnosed her killer's skin condition 18 years before doctors could. But stay with me until the very end. Because the final case involves a woman named Nancy Myer. She doesn't just see ghosts, she draws maps. She led police to a body in a dense forest with the precision of a GPS tracker. What you are about to hear is not fiction. These are real police records. Welcome to the archives. File number 1. Chicago, February 21, 1977. The fire department rushes to an apartment building on North Pine Grove Avenue. Neighbors reported smoke. Inside apartment 15B, firefighters find a mattress in flames. Underneath that mattress, they find the body of Teresita Basa. She was 47 years old, a respiratory therapist, a quiet woman who lived a quiet life. But the fire didn't kill her. She had been stabbed in the chest with a butcher knife. The killer had stripped her naked and set the fire to destroy the evidence. And it worked. The Chicago police found nothing. No fingerprints, no witnesses, no forced entry. Teresita knew her killer. She let him in. Detectives Joseph Stakula and Lee Eplin were the best in the city, but even they hit a wall. They interrogated friends, co-workers, ex-boyfriends. Dead end. The case went cold. For 5 months, Teresita's file gathered dust. The killer was free, living his life, thinking he had committed the perfect crime. He didn't know that Teresita wasn't done talking. Dr. Jose Chua and his wife Remy were co-workers of Teresita. They were also from the Philippines. In their culture, there is a strong belief in the spirit world. But Remy didn't consider herself a medium. Until one evening, everything changed. Remy was sitting in the hospital lounge when she suddenly felt a heavy, cold presence. Her head began to throb. Later, at home, lying in her bed, Remy's body went rigid. Her eyes stared blankly at the ceiling. When she opened her mouth, her voice was different. It wasn't Remy's voice anymore. It was deeper, with a distinct accent. It was Teresita. Her husband, Dr. Chua, was terrified. He asked, "What do you want?" The voice replied, "I want justice." The spirit began to speak in Tagalog. It said, "The man who killed me is Alan Showery." Alan Showery. The name shocked everyone. Alan was a respiratory therapist who worked with them. He was charming, helpful, and seemingly innocent. But the voice gave a specific detail that no one else knew. It said, "He took my jewelry, my mother's pearl ring. He gave it to his girlfriend." Remy Chua went to the police. Imagine the scene. A woman walks into a hardened detective's office and says, "A ghost told me who did it." Detective Stachula should have laughed her out of the room, but he was desperate. And there was something about the jewelry detail that felt too real. Police decided to pay Alan Showery a visit. They didn't mention the ghost. They just asked to speak with his girlfriend. And there it was, on her finger. The pearl ring. Teresita's ring. When Alan saw the police looking at it, he crumbled. He confessed to everything. He killed her for a few pieces of jewelry to pay his rent. The trial was historic. It was titled, "The People versus Alan Showery," but the newspapers called it, "The Voice from the Grave Trial." The defense tried to argue that a ghost cannot be a witness, but the judge ruled that the evidence, the ring, was real, regardless of how it was found. Alan was sentenced to 14 years. Teresita Basa had solved her own murder. Let's move to file number 2. We are going to Los Angeles. The date is December 17th, 1980. To understand this case, you need to understand the atmosphere of the city at that time. LA was on edge. The shadows of the hillside strangler still loomed over the city. Women were terrified of walking alone at night. In this climate of fear, 31-year-old Melanie Uribe vanishes. Melanie was a responsible nurse at Pacoima Memorial Hospital. She finished her shift, got into her truck, and simply dissolved into the smog of the city. She never made it home. The Los Angeles Police Department treated this as a high-priority case. They had helicopters in the air. They had patrol cars combing the grid. They interviewed witnesses. But for days they found absolutely nothing. The city held its breath. Meanwhile, in Burbank, miles away from the crime scene, a woman named Etta Smith was living a normal life. Etta wasn't a medium. She wasn't a psychic detective. She was a shipping clerk at Lockheed Aerospace, a rational woman with a 9-to-5 job. But while watching a news report about the missing nurse, something in Etta's brain snapped. She didn't just feel empathy. She felt a physical sensation. A voice, clear as a radio transmission, spoke in her mind. It said, "She is not in the city. She is in the canyon." Etta tried to ignore it, but the vision became visual. In her mind's eye, she saw a winding dirt road. She saw white paint. She saw a specific curve in a canyon. She went to the police station to tell them. The officer at the desk looked at this aerospace clerk, rolled his eyes, and filed a report that he probably threw in the trash the moment she left. Another crazy lady, they thought. But the voice didn't stop. It became a scream. So Etta did something dangerous. She decided to investigate it herself. She took her young daughter, grabbed a pair of binoculars, and got into her car. She didn't drive randomly. She felt pulled like a magnet to a place called Lopez Canyon. Now, let's talk about the geography here. Lopez Canyon is not a park. In 1980, it was a desolate, rugged area north of the city. Steep ravines, dense dry brush, rattlesnakes. It is a place where you go to hide things you never want found. Etta drove up the winding road. She stopped at a spot that looked familiar from her vision. She got out. The wind was blowing. She walked to the edge of the cliff and looked down through her binoculars. And there, hundreds of feet down, invisible from the road, was a patch of white. It was Melanie Uribe's nurse uniform. Etta found a patrol officer nearby. She waved him down, shouting, "I found her! She's down there!" The police recovered the body. It was indeed Melanie. But then, the tone shifted instantly. Imagine the situation from the detective's perspective. Detective Lee Ryan arrives at the scene. He sees a body dumped in a location that is impossible to spot from the road. The brush is too thick. The angle is too steep. And then, he sees a woman standing there who says, "I had a vision." In police work, there are no psychics. There are only guilty people who know too much. Ryan didn't see a miracle. He saw a suspect returning to the scene of the crime. He immediately arrested Etta Smith. They took her to the station. They stripped her of her clothes, gave her a jail uniform, and threw her into a cell. For 4 days, they grilled her. "Who helped you? Did you drive the truck? Why did you kill her?" Etta cried, explaining over and over about the voice. But the more accurate her vision was, the more guilty she looked. Logic was her enemy. Only the killer could know exactly where the body was. Therefore, Etta must be involved. Desperate to prove her innocence, Etta volunteered to take a polygraph test. A lie detector. We often see these in movies as magical truth machines. But the reality of 1980s polygraphy was flawed. The machine measures physiological stress, heart rate, blood pressure, sweat. Etta Smith was a mother, sitting in a homicide division, accused of murder. Her heart was pounding. Her adrenaline was spiking. She was terrified. When the examiner asked, "Do you know who killed Melanie Uribe?" Etta said no. The needle jumped. Deception indicated. The machine interpreted her fear as guilt. The police were now 100% sure they had their killer. They prepared to charge her with first-degree murder. Etta Smith was about to go to prison for life because she tried to help. But while Etta was sitting in her cell, praying for a miracle, the LAPD got a real lead. An informant tipped them off about 3 men, Spencer, Toothpaste, and another accomplice. These men had been bragging about robbing a nurse. Police raided their hideout. Under intense interrogation, the men broke. They confessed to kidnapping Melanie Uribe, robbing her, and leaving her in Lopez Canyon. The detectives asked the crucial question, "Do you know Etta Smith? Is she the mastermind?" The killers looked confused. They had never heard of her. They had no connection to her. Etta was telling the truth the entire time. Etta was released. She later sued the LAPD for wrongful arrest and won. But the mystery remains. Statisticians have calculated the probability. The area of Lopez Canyon is vast. The spot where the body lay was less than 10 square feet. The probability of Etta guessing that exact location by chance is statistically 0. Etta Smith never had another vision again. It was a one-time transmission. A signal sent, received, and then silence. File number 3. We crossed the Atlantic to West London. The year is 1983. It was a time before CCTV cameras covered every street corner, and long before DNA profiling was a standard tool in police work. Ruislip was supposed to be a safe suburb. But on the evening of February 12th, that safety was shattered. Jacqueline Poole was a 25-year-old barmaid. She was separated from her husband, living alone, trying to build a new life. She was known for her kindness and her smile. But when she failed to show up for her shift at the bar, her friends got worried. Police broke into her maisonette and found a scene of absolute horror. Jacqueline had been strangled with the cord of a dressing gown. There was a struggle. Furniture was overturned. But there was no sign of forced entry. Just like Teresita in Chicago, Jacqueline had opened the door to her killer. She knew him. Detective Superintendent Tony Lundy led the investigation. He was an old-school copper, thorough and skeptical. His team interviewed hundreds of men. Lovers, ex-boyfriends, customers at the bar. They had a list of suspects, but no physical evidence to tie anyone to the scene. The killer had been careful. He left no fingerprints. He took his weapon with him. The trail went cold almost immediately. Desperation makes people do strange things. With the police stuck, Jacqueline's grieving family turned to the paranormal. They contacted a local medium named Christine Holohan. Now, usually, police dismiss psychics as grief vampires or frauds. But Detective Lundy was desperate enough to listen. He agreed to attend a séance in Jacqueline's home. But he brought insurance. He brought a tape recorder. He wanted every word documented just in case. What happened next is a matter of police record. Christine sat in the chair where Jacqueline had died. She fell into a deep trance. Her voice changed. She began to reenact the murder, clawing at her own throat, gasping for air. It was terrifying to watch. But Lundy wasn't interested in theatrics. He wanted data. And then the voice gave him a name. Christine spelled it out. P-O-K-I-E. Pokey. It sounds like a nickname. She said, "It was Pokey. I let him in." But then she got even more specific. The medium described the killer's face. She said, "He has bad skin. Terrible spots. It hurts him. He has sores on his face." Keep that detail in your mind. The name Pokey and the bad skin. Lundy checked the files. There was a local petty criminal named Anthony Rourke. His street name? Pokey. It was a match. But there was a problem. Rourke had an alibi. And without physical evidence, a ghost story wasn't enough to arrest him. Rourke walked free. The tape was put in a box, labeled, and archived. The calendar pages turned. 1983 became 1990, then 2000. Jacqueline's file remained in the Unsolved archive. But while the case slept, science was waking up. By 2001, forensic technology had evolved. The LGC Forensics Lab in Britain began reviewing cold cases with new DNA sensitivity techniques. Dr. Santiago, a forensic scientist, pulled Jacqueline's old clothes from evidence storage. He focused on the sweater she was wearing when she died. Using a technique called LCN, low copy number DNA, he managed to extract a billionth of a gram of genetic material from the fabric. It was a mixture. Most of it was Jacqueline's. But mixed in the fibers, there were skin cells from a male. They ran the sample through the National DNA Database. The computer crunched the numbers. Beep. A hit. The DNA belonged to Anthony Rourke, the man with the alibi, the man named Pokey. The DNA proved he was there. Rourke was arrested and charged with murder, 18 years late. But here is where the story moves from good police work to unexplainable phenomenon. Detective Lundy, now retired, remembered the tape. He remembered the medium talking about the killer's skin. He has sores. It hurts him. Prosecutors pulled Anthony Rourke's medical records from the 1980s, and there it was, in black and white ink. Rourke suffered from a chronic, painful condition called psychosis barbae. It is an inflammation of the hair follicles that causes weeping sores and pustules on the face, specifically around the jawline where a man shaves. Think about the probability. A medium in 1983, sitting in a trance, didn't just guess a name. She described a specific, non-visible medical diagnosis of the killer. In court, Rourke's defense crumbled. The DNA placed him at the scene. The alibi was a lie. But the ghost of Jacqueline Poole, speaking through a medium, had identified him and his medical condition decades before the scientists could catch up. Anthony Rourke was sentenced to life in prison. The tape recording of that seance is still in the archives. It remains one of the few pieces of paranormal evidence that has been corroborated by forensic pathology. File number 4. This case is the most disturbing because it shows how close the truth can be, and yet remain completely hidden. We are in Columbus, Ohio. The year is 2004. Ashley Howley is a vibrant, 20-year-old woman with her whole life ahead of her. One evening, she gets into an argument with her boyfriend, Robert Macias. Robert is known to have a temper. According to him, Ashley walked out the door to cool off and never came back. He plays the role of the concerned boyfriend, calling her friends, asking where she is. The police file a missing person report. But without a body, there is no crime scene. Without a crime scene, there is no evidence. Robert Macias is the prime suspect, but he knows the law. He stops talking, he lawyers up, and the investigation hits a brick wall. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months, months into years. 4 years pass. Ashley's file becomes a cold case. Her family is trapped in a limbo of not knowing. But Ashley wasn't far away. She was closer than anyone dared to imagine. In 2008, desperation led the family to Christy Robinette, a psychic medium from Michigan. Christy had never heard of Ashley Howley, but she claimed that Ashley's spirit began visiting her. Christy's description of the location was specific, but confusing. She said, "Ashley is near pine trees. She is outside, but also inside. She is in water, but it feels hard, like stone. She is encased." Encased. That word is crucial. The police were skeptical, but they had nothing else to go on. They decided to search a rural property outside of Columbus that Robert Macias had owned back in 2004. He had since sold it, and new people were living there. Imagine the scene. A team of detectives, armed with shovels and a psychic's drawing, arriving at a stranger's house, asking to dig up their yard. It sounded insane. They started digging. They brought cadaver dogs, highly trained animals that can smell human decomposition years later. The dogs ran over the property. They sniffed the ground, the barn, the house. They alerted to nothing. The police brought in GPR, ground-penetrating radar. It's a device that sends radar pulses into the earth to image the subsurface. They rolled it over the yard. The screen showed rocks, roots, soil layers, but no anomalies that looked like a grave. The detectives were ready to pack up. The science said there was nothing there. The dogs said there was nothing there. But Christie, the medium, stood her ground. She pointed to a specific area near the foundation of the house. She said, "You are not deep enough. She is under the stone." Reluctantly, they started digging again. They hit something hard. It wasn't a rock. It was a thick layer of concrete that had been poured unevenly. They brought in jackhammers. As they broke through the concrete slab, the smell hit them. And then they saw it. Encased in the cement, wrapped in plastic and weighed down with heavy chains, were the human remains of Ashley Howley. Now we understand why the technology failed. The concrete acted as a seal, trapping the scent molecules so the dogs couldn't smell them. The density of the concrete and the metal chains scattered the radar signals, making the body invisible to the GPR. The most horrific part? Robert Macias had lived in that house for years after the murder. He walked over that spot every single day. He hosted barbecues in that backyard, literally standing on top of Ashley's grave. Macias was arrested. Confronted with the body he thought would never be found, he confessed. He pleaded guilty to murder and was sentenced to life. Ashley Howley was finally able to rest. And the only reason she was found is because someone listened to a voice that science said couldn't exist. And now, the final file, the bonus I promised you. In the previous cases, the paranormal events were accidental, a one-time flash of insight from a grieving relative or a random clerk. But what happens when this ability is controlled? When it is honed like a weapon? Meet Nancy Myer. She is not a fortune teller with a crystal ball. She is a psychic profiler who has worked on over 750 homicide and missing person cases alongside law enforcement agencies across the United States. Police departments don't like to admit they use her. It's bad for PR. But when the trail goes cold, when the dogs lose the scent, and the helicopters run out of fuel, they call Nancy. Nancy calls her method perceiving. She says she doesn't just see ghosts, she perceives frequencies. Violence, she claims, leaves a scar on the environment, a heavy energy signature that remains long after the body is gone. She tunes into this frequency like a radio operator finding a station in the static. Let's look at one of her most famous cases in Michigan. An elderly man with dementia wandered away from his home into a dense, swampy forest. It was getting cold. Survival time was measured in hours. Search parties combed the woods for 2 days. Nothing. The area was too vast, too wild. The sheriff, out of options, contacted Nancy. She was hundreds of miles away. She had never been to that forest. She simply sat at her kitchen table, closed her eyes, and picked up a pen. She drew a map. Not a vague sketch, but a detailed route. She drew a specific fork in the road, a peculiar rock formation, and a fallen tree near a creek. She marked a red X on the fallen tree and faxed the drawing to the police. The deputies were skeptical. They looked at the drawing and said, "This rock doesn't exist on our maps." But they went out anyway. They followed Nancy's lines. They found the fork. They found the rock. And then, Deep in the sector they had already cleared, they found the fallen tree. The man was sitting on the log, alive, shivering. He was exactly where the lady in the kitchen said he would be. The deviation was less than 20 yards. We live in an age of science. We trust ballistics, fingerprints, and DNA. And we should. Logic keeps us safe. But the 4 files we opened today, Teresita, Etta, Jacqueline, and Ashley, remind us that the world is stranger than any textbook. Sometimes the signal comes from a burning mattress. Sometimes from a concrete floor. Sometimes from a tape recorder. These cases forced the law to accept the impossible. They proved that even when the heart stops, the need for justice does not die. Which of these stories kept you on the edge of your seat? Was it the medical diagnosis from 1983? Or the body in the foundation? Let me know in the comments below. And if you have a story that logic can't explain, send it to me. I'm Arthur Vance. The archives are closing. For now. Don't forget to subscribe. You don't want to miss what we open next.